Okay, so it's breaking news right now, and it's really not a good one. The ex-president Buhari, has passed on in London, and it is really, really saddening in the sense that some few days ago he was rushed to the London hospital from his home hearing in Nigeria. Nobody really know what it was and the reasons why he was actually sent to London for a checkup. And we also understand that General Abdul Salami also was rushed to a London hospital. And it's saddening that we haven't heard anything regarding General Abdul Salami. But the one we're just hearing right now is the fact that ex-president Muhammadu Buhari, who ruled Nigeria between 2015 and 2023, just passed on. I'm just going to give you an update on how other platforms have been reporting these developments. All right, I'll just give you an update on different platforms reporting these developments. We know the Daily Trust, is also stating clearly about what we already know. Just they're reporting this for an hour ago. Buhari died at a clinic in London, United Kingdom. A spokesperson, Garba Shehu, confirmed this on Sunday in a post on X. It says, quotes, the family of the former president has announced the passing of the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, who passed on earlier today in London, GCFR this afternoon in a clinic in London. May Allah accept him in Al Janatul Firdaus. Amin. He wrote, Buhari served as Nigeria's civilian president from 2015 to 2023, following an earlier tenure as military head of state from 1983 to 1985. Born on December 17, 1942 in Daura, Buhari was known for his strong anti-corruption stance and was widely accepted or respected by his military peers as a disciplined officer. So it's breaking news right now from Daily Trust's newspaper. On The Guardian this evening, we're also hearing former President Buhari dies in London. These are different platforms that are formidable, and they are actually all based here in Nigeria. We also know that the BBC is also reporting same thing. We're going to bring you up to speed what exactly the BBC is reporting regarding that. But again, we know that Buhari, did good. Did spend most of his life serving his community. He served as former head of state between 1983 and 1985, and also came and served as civilian president between 2015 and 2023. May he so rest in peace. And it's just a devastating story that we are following for you at this moment. And it's one that, when you look at his life, it's one that is commendable, given what he has been able to achieve as two-time leader of of Nigeria, as a military head of state, and of course, someone who is a civilian head of state. You can't really take anything away from him, given what he has been able to achieve. So it's a life well spent, given that though he didn't clock up to 100, but you could say that he did well with how he basically Okay, that was Muhammadu Buhari relishing the moments he spent while he was still here with us as president of the country, as the military head of state from 1983 to 1985. And of course, between 2015 and 2023, he has been one interesting leader that everyone looks up to in terms of anti-corruption. He is also one that you could look up to as someone who could give you an update about what his life was about. He was aged 82. This is from the BBC this morning. Former Nigerian leader Muhammadu Buhari dies at aged 82. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari, who has died aged 82 in a London clinic, was a military ruler and a self-styled converted Democrat who returned to power through elections but struggled to convince Nigerians he could deliver on the change he promised. Never a natural politician, he was seen as aloof and austere, but he retained a reputation for personal honesty, a rare feat for a politician in Nigeria. After three failed attempts, Buhari achieved a historic victory in 2015, becoming the country's first opposition candidate to defeat an incumbent in 2019. He was re-elected for another four-year term. Buhari had always been popular among the poor of the northern, known as the Talakawa in the Hausa language, but for the 2015 campaign, he had the advantage of a united opposition grouping behind him. Many of those who supported him thought his military background and disciplinarian credentials were what the country needed to get to grips with the Islamist insurgency in the north. Buhari also promised to tackle corruption and nepotism in government and create employment opportunities for young Nigerians. But his time in office coincided with a slump in global oil prices and the country's worst economic crisis in decades. His administration also came under fire for its handling of insecurity. While campaigning, he had promised to defeat the Islamist militant group Boko Haram, but the group remains a threat, and one of its factions is now affiliated to the so-called Islamic State group. There was also an upsurge in deadly clashes between farmers and ethnic Fulani headsmen in central Nigeria. Mr. Buhari of Fulani was accused of not being tough enough on the headers or doing enough to stop the crisis. The activities of the so-called bandits in the northwestern parts of the country saw the abduction of hundreds of secondary school students. Under his watch, armed forces were accused of human rights abuses, like opening fire on anti-police brutality protesters at the Lekki toll gate in Lagos in October of 2020. Muhammadu Buhari was born in December 1942 in Daura in Katsina State in the far north of Nigeria, near the border with Niger. At the time, Nigeria was controlled by the British, and it would be another 18 years before the country gained independence. Buhari's father, who died when he was 4, was Fulani, while his mother, who brought him up, was Kanuri. In a 2012 interview, Buhari spoke of being his father's 23rd child and his mother's 13th. He said his only recollection of his father was of the two of them and one of his half-brothers being thrown from the back of a horse. Interesting story. The young Buhari attended primary school in Daura and then boarding school in the city of Katsina. After leaving school, he was admitted to the Nigerian Military Training College, joining the military shortly after independence. Buhari undertook officer training in the UK from 1962 to 1963 and then began his steady climb up the ranks. In later years, Buhari attributed his disciplinarian bent to spending his formative years at boarding school, where corporal punishment was the norm, and in the military. He was lucky to have experienced such tough environments, which taught him to work hard. He says, in 1966, there was a military coup and then counter-coup in Nigeria, a time of upheaval for army officers, but Buhari always maintained he was too junior to have played any significant role. Less than 10 years later, under a military government, Buhari had risen to become military governor of the Northeast, an area then comprising 6 states. After less than a year, Buhari, now in his mid-30s, was promoted again, becoming Federal Commissioner for Petroleum and Natural Resources, in effect, oil minister. In 1976, under Olusegun Obasanjo, in his first spell as Nigerian head of state. By 1978, Buhari, then a colonel, had returned to being a military commander. His stuff stands in 1983 when some Nigerian islands were annexed in Lake Chad by Chadian soldiers. Is still remembered in the northeast after he blockaded the area and drove off the invaders. The end of 1983 saw another coup against elected President Shehu Shagari, and Buhari, now a major general, became the country's military ruler by his own account. He was not one of the plotters, but was installed and subsequently discarded by those who held the real power and needed a figurehead. Other accounts suggest he played a more active role in removing Shagari than he was willing to admit. Buhari ruled for 20 months, a period remembered for a campaign against indiscipline and corruption as well as for human rights abuses. About 500 politicians, officials, and businessmen were jailed as part of a campaign against waste and corruption. Some saw this as a heavy-handed repression of military rule. Others remember it as a praiseworthy attempt to fight the endemic corruption that was holding back Nigeria's development. Buhari retained a rare reputation for honesty among Nigerian politicians, both military and civilian, largely because of his campaign. As part of this war against indiscipline, he ordered Nigerians to form neat queues at bus stops under the sharp eyes of whip-wielding soldiers. Civil servants who were late for work were publicly humiliated by being forced to do frog jumps. Some of these measures might have been seen as merely eccentric, but others were genuinely repressive, such as a decree to restrict press freedom, under which journalists were jailed. Buhari's government also locked up Nigeria's greatest musical hero, Fela Kuti, a thorn in the side of successive leaders on trumped-up charges relating to currency exports. Buhari's attempts to rebalance the public finance by curbing imports led to many job losses and the closure of businesses. As part of anti-corruption measures, he also ordered that the currency be replaced. The color of the naira notes was changed, forcing all holders of old notes to exchange them at banks within a limited period. Prices rose while living standards fell, and in August 1985, Buhari was ousted and imprisoned for 40 months. Army Chief General Ibrahim Babangida took over after his release, and he said, having seen the consequences of the breakup of the Soviet Union, Buhari decided to enter party politics, now convinced of the virtues of multi-party democracy and free and fair elections. Despite this, Buhari always defended the 1983 coup, saying in 2005, the military came in when it was absolutely necessary and the elected people had failed the country. He also rejected accusations that his measures against journalists and others had gone too far, insisting that he had been merely applying the laws that others had been breaking. He was elected president in 2015, becoming the first opposition candidate to defeat an incumbent since the return of multi-party democracy in 1999. As president, Buhari made a virtue of his incorruptibility, declaring his relatively modest wealth and saying he had spurned several past opportunities to enrich himself. He was plain-spoken by nature, which sometimes played well for him in the media and sometimes badly. Although few doubted his personal commitment to fighting corruption, and there were several notable scalps, some questioned whether the structures enabling mismanagement had really been formed. Attempts to improve youth employment prospects were at best a work in progress. On the day Buhari left office, some Nigerians were asked in a video that was widely shared on social media what they would remember most about his time in office, and all respondents has said the same thing: bag of rice. The reason was simple: rice is the staple food in the country. A standard 50 kg bag of rice, which could help feed a family of between 8 and 10 for about a month, costs just 7,500 naira. Under President Goodluck Jonathan, who was defeated by Buhari in 2015, but went up to 60,000 naira a few years afterwards. This led to hunger in many parts of the country. The huge surge in the price of rice was because, in an echo of his earlier policy as a military ruler, Buhari banned the importation of rice to encourage more Nigerian farmers to grow the crop. However, local producers were unable to meet the high demand, and many of his supporters lost their faith in Nigeria, or in him rather. Ismail Dayaro, a resident of the northern city of Kano, said he had backed Buhari since he first contested the presidency in 2003. At one point, even Buhari's wife threatened not to support his re-election bid. Indeed, what a man he was. Nigerians love nicknames, and some of the country's leaders' nicknames have stuck even long after they left office. For example, former military leader Ibrahim Badamasi Bangida is still called Maradona for what people perceive as the tactical dribbles on issues and situations. For Buhari, it was Baba Father Go Slow after it took him 6 months to name his first cabinet on assuming office in 2015. Responding to his nickname years later, Buhari said it wasn't his fault that it took a long time to get anything done. Yes, we are slow because the system is slow. It's not Baba that is slow, but it is the system. So I am going by this system and I hope we will make it, he said in 2018. Nigerian politics in 2022-2023 remains one of the most interesting in the country's democratic history. In the minds of many, it was the first time that a sitting president wasn't really bothered about who his successor was going to be. Openly, Buhari declared he would support whoever won his party's All Progressives Congress nomination, but insiders say behind the scenes he was ambivalent. Buhari's body language emboldened all five candidates seeking the APC's endorsement, and their supporters all went around saying they had his backing. At one point, it felt as if Buhari opposed the candidacy of his eventual successor, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, what followed was the declaration of the Naira swap policy, which the Buhari administration announced would, among other things, limit the influence of money in the 2023 elections. Many Nigerians believe that the policy was targeted at preventing Tinubu from becoming president, even though he had been chosen as APC candidate. The policy involved the falsification of trillions of Naira notes that there were replacements with new notes for the highest denominations. However, there were not enough new notes, leading to the shortages and suffering by millions, particularly the less well-off who rely on cash for their daily transactions. The policy was only suspended after a Supreme Court ruling just days before the elections. Tinubu won narrowly with 37% of votes cast as the opposition was divided. Any assessments of Buhari's presidency must take account his declining health, which caused him to take significant absence from work, especially during his first term. The former military ruler may have reinvented himself as a Democrat, but there was no such commitment to transparency concerning his own health, with Nigerians left uninformed about the fitness of their head of state for office. Muhammadu Buhari married twice, first to Safinatu Yusuf from 1971 to 1988, and then in 1989 to Aisha Halilu, who survives him. He had 10 children. Well, interesting read, isn't it? I hope you have enjoyed the reading for Muhammadu Buhari. It's just been an interesting personality who had been Nigeria's president in the last 8 years between 2015 and 2023. I hope I covered as much as possible. All right, so this is where we drop the curtain on this particular show. We're back shortly. We're going to actually have this repeated, hopefully for those who have missed out on whatever it is that they may have left off regarding this development. Thank you so much for watching, and see you on the other side. God bless.